It's so much easier than using Teams. Teams only keeps recordings for so long, and it makes it hard for you to actually download it for some reason. I don't know why, but it's really hard to get it where you can download it and put it on Blackboard. So anyway, um, let's try to get through this. I'm going to share my screen, and like I said, my you like my background? It's a beautiful background. Um, like I said, the the you're going to see infinity here in a second, or maybe you won't. I guess if I'm not on there, you won't see it. But, um, or do you see it? No, you don't. You got lucky. Hi, Lee. Okay, so I'm recording, I'm sharing my screen, and one of the things I wanted to do this week is tie this week's lesson and all of the previous stuff we've done into a single file that is an idea for a project. Now that I'm doing this, you cannot use this as your idea unless you already started. But I decided to do the word guessing game, and I did it two different ways. I did it with functions and without functions. um, I will, in full disclosure, say that I wrote it with function or without functions first. So this is my code, and I wrote it with functions. But what I did is I took my code, plugged it into ChatGPT, and said, rewrite this with functions. Okay. Um, so I just wanted to give you full disclosure because a couple things change, like this variable of IDX and stuff like that. Because when you ask it to convert, it converts it, but sometimes it has its own it takes its own freedom on how it's going to do it. Um, so we'll just leave it at that. Primarily the goal is to look at, okay, we got a clear screen. Well, where do I call that? And so on and so on. Okay. But we'll start with this one. Um, and I'm going to let me see if I can minimize this. Will someone keep their eye on the chat to see if anyone raises their hands and stuff? Because I can't see that on my screen, especially when I minimize this so you guys don't see that there. Okay. So please, if anyone has a question, make sure that you, uh, well, if you have a question, just hold down the space bar and ask it out loud. Okay. That might be the easiest way. Okay. So I created a guessing game. And this guessing game in its current format allows you to play against a friend or a computer. There is one thing that doesn't work, and it has to do with the this get pass. For some reason, get pass isn't working. All that get pass does is um, it masks the word that somebody types in. So if I run this program over here in the console, it asks if you want to play against a friend, yes or no. If I put a Y, you guys can see my console, correct? Someone please let me know. Um, if I put a Y, by the way, console's over here. I'm going to make it a little larger so it's easier for you guys to see. Okay. I can't zoom in, but this is the best I can do. It gives me a warning. It says QT console does not support password mode. So in this console, um, it doesn't support this command. Uh, all it was there for is to mask when somebody types their word, because if I'm playing against another person, um, and I type rupture, for instance, you can see it, but technically I can mask that through other methods. I just didn't change it. But in other consoles and stuff like that, that will work. I believe it works. I want to say it works on Replit, but anyway, our repl.it. Um, Now, here it is. It says the word is seven long. This masking I created. Okay. And it says the word is seven long. If I put an R in, it tells me there were two R's and it places it, right? If I put a P in, it tells me how many, shows me where it was. If I put an A in, it shows me, and also look, it's keeping track of the letters I've already guessed. Okay. And it says you guessed an A, you have made one. There should be the word error after that. I allow 5 errors and then it kicks you out. Okay. So if I put a T in there, if I put a P, I don't want to, I already guessed a P. Um, so that's 2 errors because it's no longer in there because I removed that P from the list. Okay. And I'll get to the code in a second to explain it and deal with that a little bit. Okay. Um, if I guess a W, just show you that the errors are counting. If I guess an O, but now if I guess an E, okay, there was one, it puts it in place. If I guess a U, it throws me out because I won. So I'm missing something in my code where I didn't say, hey, you won. It just kicks me out. Um, Makes sense? So that's one way. The other way is if I click this and I say no, it plays against the computer and it's telling me the word is 5 letters long. Okay. Where it's getting the words from is this TXT file called words. If I open that, you can see all of these letters or all of these words. Right now, I know it's 5 letters, so I can look at how many I have. I have hello, I have three, I have dream, so I can see the words. Um, if you notice something, rupture is on the list. It's the last one in the list. Um, what happens is I have it set up that if you play against a friend, every word that your friend types in or that you type in gets added to this words dictionary, this text file. Okay, so the word list continually grows as we go through. And when you play the computer, it takes one of these random words. Okay, it randomizes and picks one of these words. Um, so if I put a T in, oh, not there. Escape. Control Z. I did something wrong. No, don't save. If I put a T in, is there a T? You have guessed a T, you made one error. Okay. If I said D for dream, I don't have that either. If I say H for hello, there is one H. Okay. So, EA, no, E's not in there, is it? I didn't guess an E yet, did I? So E is in there and so on. So, um, is this interesting? First off, um, number two, we're going to talk about a few things other than that. Um, One of them is the operates OS clear command because the clear command right here that I have in my code, we're importing OS, which means we're importing operating system commands um, from OS. So I imported this, and from this, I want to import specifically systems commands. Okay. And one of the systems commands, you have to use the underscore equals, but one of the systems commands is clear. Am I expecting you guys to do this? No, I'm not expecting you guys to do this. I'm just explaining the code that I have. This get pass is not doing me any good right now, and I already explained why. Position And I'll get to that in a second too. As we go through the code, you'll see where these words come up, okay? Because you got to remember when you see code like this, you have to actually pay attention to where your variables are and stuff like that. One thing I wish it had was that if I hovered over a variable, I wish it would show me, oh, it does. Don't, never mind. This one does. So when I click on a variable, if I scroll down, you can see where it's at. Okay. Makes sense. Um, and we'll explain what that does in a second. Errors, we're counting it. We're seeing how many errors. Right here, you see comments in my code. I'll make this code available to you guys in Blackboard. If you are doing a guessing game for your project and because you already started, then what I would recommend you doing is not reading this because I want you to code it. And it's really, oh, how do you say it? It's really, uh, trying to think of how I'd say this. It's really tempting to take stuff, but a lot of times it's not, you don't even mean to take stuff. When you read code, you're like, oh yeah, I like the way he did that, and you do it. And it's not of ill intent, right? Um, I learned something through the years that when people plagiarize, a lot of times it's not of ill intent. A lot of times it's just uh, due to I'll call it laziness because what happens is you'll copy a quote in and copy and paste something in and then you just forget to cite it. Um, it's really easy to do that. And if you don't cite things right away, it makes it really difficult to go back and figure it out. Um, Copy and paste is just one of those things. And you might have had every intention of doing things properly, but that's that. Now with programming, programming's different because there might be 100 ways of doing something, but there is never a single way. I can't say never. There is some code that is copyrighted and stuff like that. And there are some codes that have patents on them and stuff like that. Um, Typically, you don't find that code and stuff when you're searching online uh, because they're usually trade secrets and that doesn't get shared. Um, But if you're to copy some code from Stack Overflow, or you're to copy some code from Chat GPT because you couldn't figure something out and you asked it a question of, well, how do you mask a password or something like that? Um, you don't have to cite that stuff because it's kind of public information. It's no one's ever copyrighted it. Um, I remember in grad school one time, just to give you an example of something sort of like this, um, there was a discussion board and I posted something and I used the same language as another person in class. And it wasn't the same phrase as much as just the same language. And the professor actually nailed me for plagiarism and turned me into the school. And I'm like, how can you nail me for plagiarism? And he's like, well, it's the same as someone else in class. And my response to him was, well, you owe me an apology and you have to contact the school and um, tell them to remove that from my file because my argument with you is that it's industry language. It's like saying the boy fell in the mud. Anyone and everyone can say that. You can put it in your paper. There's nowhere to quote it. It's just common knowledge. Um, and there is common knowledge in industry and common speak in industry, like phrases and stuff like that, that aren't copyrighted. And my answer to him was, you find the original person that created this phrase, and I'd be more than willing to cite that. I said, but that person and myself in the class, we both use the same phrase, but it's not either of our phrases, number one. And number two, it's just common language for the industry. And we used it in different ways. So it was like, whatever. But my point being is that the same thing goes with code. It's hard for me to say, well, you're plagiarizing. Now, if you took this whole program, you copied and pasted it, and you're trying to claim it as yours, that's a totally different story. If I had taken someone else's post, copied and pasted it, and just changed an and to a uh, also and a the to a something else, that's plagiarism, and that's a problem. Um, but if you're typing this stuff up yourself and maybe you find that you need a little help on something and you go out to ChatGPT and you get some code from it, um, I don't fault people on that. Okay. So anyway, um, now I'm going to continue with this after saying all that. Yeah, that was a long-winded thing. You guys can just tell me to shut up next time. um, I'm going to skip this because this right here is where it is masking the word that somebody types in. And I already explained that's not working. Now, this is where we start getting into text files, and this is going to be um, what we some of what we do next week. We want to continue on with the functions and stuff like that. But right there, I'm using f equals open words.txt, comma, a plus. The comma a plus says to the computer, if words.txt does not exist, create it. If it does exist, the a is appended. Okay, so whatever I type in is going to end up going there. I'm writing, so I do f dot write, word two. Well, there's word two, whatever somebody typed in, right? And then I do a plus uh, single quote slash n single quote. That's making it so when I look at my file, it sends it to the next line. Okay. So it's just adding a hard return, basically. Well, not basically, it's adding a hard return. Okay. And then here I close the file. Okay. Now, the length, you got to remember right here, I have word. Okay. Word equals word two. This here is supposed to be the symbol that goes in to mask what someone types in. Okay. So here it's you're using get pass, but you're saying prompt input your word. So that's almost the same as an input, but it's not. It's get pass, then prompt equals. Again, I wouldn't recommend using this because it's going to give you that warning and stuff. You don't have to mask it. That's not the goal of this project and assignment. It's really the goal to see that it works against a computer or a person, and testing it doesn't really matter. Okay. Um, but here I'm saying length equals len of whatever word is. So len is just find the length of the word. Now, if you look here, word equals, and I put it in square brackets, so it's a list. Okay. So mask word two, but we're storing it as a list. And if you look up here, word is a variable and it's a list. Okay, here I'm just filling it. Makes sense? Um, now, so if all of that is, if I'm playing against a person, that's that. Else, if I'm not playing against that person, because the other option is any letter other than Y, right? So anything other than Y brings me to the else. If it's else, I want to say with open. So I want to open words.txt or txt, and I want to read. I'm opening it in read mode. Okay. And then it's going to look at lines equals len, length of fp.read lines. And what it's going to do is it's going to count how many lines there are. Okay. So it knows when to stop and when to start. Okay. And it's important because I have to know how many lines there are because I'm going to pick a random line out of there. Okay. And if I look at rand line right here, so I'm going to import random, which I could have imported that way up here, by the way. I didn't have to import it down there. As a matter of fact, I probably should have put it up here. Um, as a matter of fact, if I move it, it's not going to hurt anything. I'm going to leave it there though for now. Um, this line here that I commented out says print total number of lines, comma, lines. That was a testing uh, that was a testing mechanism that I used to see if it was actually returning the number of lines in the file. Okay. A lot of times you're going to want to do code that shows you what's inside of a variable or something like that, especially if you're not using um, especially if you're not using uh, something like Spider where it shows you all of your variables, okay, and shows you what's in them and so on, okay. Um, so that would have just printed how many lines there were. Um, Now I'm going to import random. Again, I could have done that up here. Or did I just say that? I just said that. Never mind. Um, and I say random line equals random dot random integer. So I'm not picking a random word necessarily. I'm picking a position, right? I'm picking something between zero and lines. Makes sense? So I'm saying random line equals random dot random integer. So I'm going to generate a random integer between 0 and however many lines there are in the file. Okay. Here I was just printing the random number that got generated to see what was happening. I commented that out because it wasn't necessary. It was just for testing. Um, Here I'm opening words.txt. Here I'm saying lines, which is this here, read lines. And what am I reading to? So I'm saying we open it, we're going to lines, f dot read lines. I'm going to read, but I'm going to do computer word or comp word is the one that it's going to select. And it says lines int random line. So I'm looking at lines. I want that to equal, I want to read whatever the random line value was, which is right here. So when I generated that, I want to go to that line number basically. So I'm reading from lines that line number. Okay. Um, it gets confusing because you have things like word two and you have word and what's word and word two, et cetera, et cetera. Again, this is masking word two. So word two, if I look at word two and everywhere that it goes, word two shows up here if I'm playing against a computer or a person, but word two here is comp word. So all of a sudden there's comp word. We got it from a line. We're saying word two equals comp word. And then here I'm saying word equals, and I'm throwing that back into a list. Okay. Um, you cannot take this line right here and throw it into a list. It gives you an error. You're going to run into things like that where it says, like your error might be, uh, this command does not support these attributes, or uh, this command does not support this many arguments, or something like that. When you run into that, um, a lot of times that's what it would be, is it's saying, hey, you can't take this command and store that in a list. You have to convert it to a string, You have to make sure that it's then put in the list. Okay. And then once it's in the list, I can count how many the length of the word, and then minus one. Uh, I don't know why I did that, but it's necessary. I don't remember why. I would have to print um, the length without that and see what it is. I think it's because I want to say it's because it was counting the hard return. I don't remember exactly. It's been a while. And then I say letter position. So here I opened it, put it in read mode, but I again said, you know what, I'm not doing that. I'm commenting that out. A lot of times when I put code in, even if I'm not going to use it again, or I think I'm not going to use again, I'll comment it out just in case. Because if I need to go back and test something instead of me trying to figure out where that code goes and everything, all I have to do is go uncomment that and I've got a line of code that runs. Okay. And then I created a list variable that says letters guessed equals, and it's just an empty list. And then answer equals, and it's an empty list. And then I have count of 0. Okay. I'm not going to go through every line of code because here's where things get a little simpler to some degree because we're used to while statements and stuff like that. Um, so let's see. I would actually tell you guys to go through the rest of this code line by line, just trying to understand it. If I sit here and explain every one of them, it doesn't make much sense. Because you can highlight a value and see where it is and what I'm doing with it, or a variable, and you can highlight this and see what I'm doing with it and where it goes and stuff like that. Um, letters guessed dot append somewhere up here. I created that list, so that's appending that list. And when that list got created, it gets printed to the screen when I'm playing. It shows these are the letters guessed. Um, I figure it was only fair to show a user or a player the letters that they've already guessed so they don't make a mistake and guess it again, if that makes sense. Maybe. What on earth is all this stuff? I hate when you know what? I gotta turn that off. How many of you are addicted to your phone that if you hear a notification go off, you have to look at it? Yeah, all of us are, I think. It's life. So anyway, this is an example of what I would look for in a project, at least the beginning of a project. There might be more things that we would do, like instead of storing these in a TXT file, I think it would be much better if we stored it in an Excel file. Because Excel would allow us to organize our words in a better way. Excel might also help us keep track of the statistics of how many wins and losses somebody had or what have you. Um, now, when I say organize, I could see Excel being something where you would have, type a word in between uh, 4 and 10 characters, and every column would be different. So the first column would be like 4 letter words, second column would be 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you would draw from those, for instance. Um, and then you would give the player an option. Okay, well, you want to play against the computer. How many letters would you like, or what level of difficulty would you like? And if you chose a high level of difficulty, you would be choosing between like 7 and 10 letters. If you wanted a low, it'd be between like 4 and 6, or what have you. Okay, so that's why I tell you that it's really important to come up with a game plan at the beginning. What are you trying to accomplish? Make a list, make a bulleted list of what you want your program to do, what you want this project to be able to do. And once you have a list, like an exhaustive list of what you think this program should be able to do, then what you do is you take and you break that off. You say, okay, these are the things it has to do, and these are the things that I would also like to add. So you separate it between the things that it has to do to be able to run, and then what you would like it to do beyond that. It's kind of like doing the difference between features and benefits, right? You buy a car and they have tons and tons of features, but which ones actually benefit you? Um, now, I call it wants versus needs, or wants versus whatever was supplied to you if you're buying something. Uh, so that's where I would like you guys to be on that. And that's why I use this project to kind of give us something to talk about other than um, just the textbook. Now, in this, I'll give you both sets of code. In this, here's the code that I had generated by ChatGPT. I took the same, sorry, excuse me. Um, I took the same, I took my code, pasted it in there, and said, rewrite this with functions. And as you go through, you should be able to see where I'm calling something. So I click on this function. This function, the goal of this function is to clear the terminal screen. And when I click on it, it shows where I call on it. Okay, so under this function of play game, I'm calling this function. Okay, but I'm also, if I go through this, am I calling other functions inside of here? Okay, um, and by the way, here's where you call your main function of play game. Okay, um, the nice thing about functions is it allows you to organize your code. And what's really cool about it is that in organizing your code, you put your all your functions, it doesn't matter what order they're in. What matters is where you call them. It has to, like, your functions have to be like located up there before you get to a main um, part of the program where you're actually running the whole program. But it's really cool because you break it into smaller parts. Um, for instance, check win condition checks if the player has won the game by guessing all letters. So it's going to compare to see if length equals 0. And length equals 0 means the length of word 2. Because remember, what I didn't tell you is when you guess a letter, if the letter is in the word, it places it in the right spot for the position variable, which prints to the screen, but it removes that letter from the list of word 2. Okay. So all of a sudden it removes that. Um, I, I, I have multiple variables for a reason because one has to still show the same word, um, like the original word. And then word 2 is the one where I can remove the values. Um, this is an example of, like, this is how my brain works. Uh, if it was one of you, you might choose to name things differently because this might not make sense to you. A lot of times I go back to programs that I've written in the past, and it takes me a little bit to figure out exactly what I did because maybe I don't name my variables in a way that truly makes sense. Um, word 2 might not have been the best option. Word might not have been the best option. Um, what does that variable really contain, and what is that variable really being used for? Um, a way of solving that would also be to add more comments. Commenting your code is immensely important. Okay. If you're not commenting your code, um, especially for areas of your code that don't make sense or might not make sense to the average programmer. Okay. Um, Code that is very specific logic that you've created that other people might not understand. That's when you do a comment. Okay. You also do comments that tell you things like choose to play between friend or a computer. So you know what's going on in your program and so on. Um, does that make sense to you guys? But I will provide this code um, to you all so you can copy and paste it into whatever editor you're using and see how it works and test different things. I strongly recommend just changing variables and seeing what happens and stuff. Because if you change a variable, you're going to probably get an error somewhere because you're calling on that variable in many places sometimes. So it's just another way of learning how to code. Okay. So let me get back to an image of my students. Um, oh, I got a chat. Karen, did you have a question or you just, is he in here? Or was he in a, oh, he's not in here now. Oh, yeah, he is. He's right there. Did you have a question? I see your name on there. I just want to verify if you had a question or if you're good.
Sorry, are we talking to me?
Yeah.
Oh, so could you repeat the question? I've got a bit of a headache going on at the moment, so it's hard for me to pay attention.
Oh, well, no, I just saw your name in the chat and I didn't know if you were
Oh,
asking a specific,
I
if there
didn't
was,
post anything in there.
okay, well, if there was nothing, that's okay. I was just checking because I
Okay,
don't want to
yeah.
leave questions unanswered. I'm going to actually stop my presentation at this point. I will copy and paste that, all that good stuff. Um, and my question for you guys is, was this was this helpful? Was this useful? Did you learn something from this, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, it was good.
If you got something new out of this, give me a thumbs up. That's when you click react. You can give a thumbs up. Okay. If this was useful in helping you determine like project wise, because next week we're going to actually work on that too, is getting that running and going good. Um, Plenty of time to do them. Um, did it help you in your mindset on that? No. Yes, no? Okay. Um, are you learning something in this class? Even though we've had this real-time online stuff and that, are you actually getting something out of this class? Are you happy with where we're going and where we've been? Do I need to slow down? Do I need to speed up? Do I need to, uh, at this point, we're only about halfway through the semester. What can I do to improve at this point? And so on. So if you don't want to say on here in chat or whatever, drop me an email if there's anything I can that you think might be beneficial. Okay. Um, and we'll go from there. I take criticism well as long as it's constructive criticism. Don't tell me that you're an a-hole. Not you're an a-hole, but you don't say Sanford, you're an a-hole. Um, I hate you because that's not constructive criticism. I can't do anything about that. Because at the end of the day, I don't care if people like me. I do, but I don't. You know what I'm saying? Um, any questions, concerns? We good? Holy cow. We did the whole class. We only have like what, 2 minutes or 6 minutes left? Yeah, it goes to 11:20. No, it goes to 11:50 technically, doesn't it? So anyway, if you don't have any questions or anything, we're good. And I will get that code out there for you guys at some point today. Probably not right this moment. Um, and we can go from there. So, no, everyone hear me okay? Okay. Um, that's all I have. If you guys don't have anything, we're good. Have a good weekend.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Take care. Yep. Lee, anything? No? No, Lee? Okay. So I'm going to stop recording.